Yeah, welcome everyone. Welcome to this fourth ENHANCE Lunchinar today. We discussed today how to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion in our universities of technology. Key learnings from a tour of technical universities in Europe and the US. I'm delighted to welcome you to this session. And my name is Melih Özkardeş. So here I am also. Hopefully you can see now also the screen. Exactly. So I'm very delighted to welcome you to this session of our Enhanced Lunchinars about different diversity topics. Enhanced Lunchinars are bite-sized learning sessions which are designed to foster critical thinking, engage our community, and stimulate public debate. So with you, with everyone involved today. Our aim is to create a space where we can learn and reflect on pressing issues in academia and society. So today's topic, how to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion, is of utmost importance. It's particularly timely also because of the current developments against diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also, the comparison between the US and Europe universities of technologies is highly relevant. As you see, we will go to a tour of technical universities in Europe and the US. We are very happy that we have such an expert also in our alliance. So Kai Lo Andersson is also here having or holding a PhD in technology, management, and economics at Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg in Sweden, which is also a member of our ENHANCE Alliance. So in a while, I will introduce you more, Kailo. Maybe after giving you this, and of course, I'm your host today from Enhanced Diversity Office, Melih Özkardeş. Let me just also show you the slide, the next slide that I am just showing to you here. Let's see. Exactly. First things first. So let's create a safe space also in this event. We are right now 25 people that everyone feels really welcome and also engaged and invited to listen actively and be critical and ask questions and discuss. So diversity is of course not always visible, also in online events. So please meet everyone as their own self. Do not make any assumptions about gender, religion, family, or relationship, and so on and so on. Any identities of people. And we really encourage everyone to participate. This is your right, use it. And let's also listen to understand, not just to respond while we are discussing or getting different opinions, for example. So I'm really looking forward to wander together with you and welcome questions and also learn from our mistakes. Yeah, feel welcome. And I'm just changing the slide about the goals of Enhanced Lunchinars. Just briefly, like I said, it's about promoting dialogue and critical discussions, providing an engaging and practical learning also. So I hope you will be learning also from our expert from Chalmers today. And also expand accessibility and reach, because this offer is basically open for everyone, not only for a specific group within ENHANCE. So we are open for actually everyone, also outside of the ENHANCE Alliance. And I see someone greeting from even Romania. So welcome, very nice that you are also here. And let me just change the slide again. Today's agenda is actually quite straight. These are just the last seconds that you are listening to me, because just in couple of seconds, I will be giving the word to our expert, Kai Lo Andersson, to share their research, to take us on this tour that they also did. And by the way, let me also introduce you Mentimeter. Let me see that I share with you the link, because right now it is of course empty, our Mentimeter, but you can change it of course by asking questions. Let me just put the link to enter this Mentimeter in the Zoom chat, that everyone please opens that, and actually whatever or whenever you have a question or any comment, and please also be critical and honest, and because all these questions that you can add to Mentimeter are anonymous, and our expert will do their best to answer your questions. And of course, the whole community, whole audience is invited to also interact whatever questions will arise on the Mentimeter during the session and also after the session. But no worries, if you don't like tools like Mentimeter, after the presentation, you can also just ask your question, speak into the mic, or just use the Zoom chat for whatever reason. When you don't access Mentimeter, Zoom chat is also available. So I hope everyone is at least technically now on the same page. Let me just come back to the presentation and read you further. And after the discussion and Q&A, we will be closing the session. And at the end of Kaido's presentation, you will also get to know a practical tool that we are very happy to share with you that you can hopefully also use and share with your colleagues or with your networks, so then we can increase also the impact of the expertise that we share here with you. That's it, actually, I think from my side. I will now stop sharing and coming back to you, Kylo. Let me see, where are you? You are sharing your screen. Perfect. I can see your screen now, right now in big. I hope it is the case for everyone. Otherwise, let us know. And
Good.
over to you.
I see the nods and the thumbs up. Great.
You
And you
see
can
it?
hear me well
Perfect.
as well?
Yes.
Great.
Over
Then
to
I
you.
will get into presentation mode.
Yes.
Yes, so welcome to this presentation. As Meli said, I'm Lo Andersson, and the title today is How Can Technical Universities Improve DEI Works? Insight from Europe and the US. So I'm a doctor in technology management and economics, as Meli said, from Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg, Sweden. More specifically, my title in the PhD was called Gender and Technology. And my background from my undergraduate is in social anthropology, so studying culture through observation and interviews. And I defended my thesis in May. It's a compilation thesis with 4 articles. I will have links in the end of my presentation that you will also be able to access. So my research focus was mainly gender inequality in DEI work in technical universities. So it was basically also studying it from the inside, because my PhD project was a research project about the Genie project at Chalmers. That was where my funding came from, and that was the start of my research, actually. So the goal was to study to be both an study doing research on the project, but also contributing to the project by doing my research, but also giving feedback to the project. So I began by studying the project itself, and then I moved outwards, studying gender equality officers at Chalmers. I now wrote a paper about methods and the problem of studying your funder, for example, and your own university, where you are both an employee and a student. And then my final article, that is partly focused for today's talk, is that I also have a public report on, was geared towards practitioners of gender equality and DEI work, specifically in technical universities, but I think it can also go broader at other universities as well, or in departments of technology and engineering. So I will go over the study that I did, an article, and then the report findings. So what they mean for us going forward in making DEI or EDI part of our academic cultures at technical universities. And then, as Meli said, we will have time for questions and discussion. So looking at my research overview here of these 2 topics for today, I did 23 different interviews across Europe and the US, focusing on DEI workers and scholars at technical universities. So the universities were chosen because they were high up on Times Higher Education list for technical or STEM dominant universities in 2022. But I also included the Scandinavian countries who were unfortunately not at the top of that list. And I did this research in 2023, beginning in February when I traveled to the US first. So the 12 top technical universities in Northwestern Europe and the US were chosen. And the majority of my interviewees were DEI workers and some scholars. So the outputs of this research was a journal article that is under review called From Gender Equality to Inclusive Diversity, Discourses Among Equality Workers in Scandinavia. And then the report, which has been published since 2023, How to Improve Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Key Learnings from a Tour of Technical Universities in Europe and the US. So when I started to do, I both wanted to do both a public report and a research article. So when I was trying to do this study, I really wanted to find out what is it like to be a change maker and to work with these issues in technical universities outside of my own environment where I've been. So there's been, at many technical universities, as you know, a strong ambition to make academic staff more diverse and to improve gender equality. And to make this happen, the universities rely on people working with these specific issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sometimes they are researchers, sometimes in HR roles. But does it actually feel like to be one of those people who work with these things? And how is it trying to change environments that are still very male-dominated and built around ideas of merit and excellence? So in this study, for the article specifically, I included 10 DEI workers and scholars from technical universities in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. And they were a mix of HR employees, engineering, and social science researchers. So through in-depth interviews, I explored how they talk about their works, the challenges they face, and how they understand concepts like diversity, gender equality, and intersectionality. And these all came up in the discussions. So these ideas were also often used together, but not always clearly defined. So I was trying to get at understandings of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also the institutional barriers and local cultures and contexts. And my key finding then from this was that diversity and intersectionality tended to blur together in practice. So diversity is framed as something that strengthens organizations, for example, by bringing in perspectives of boosting innovation, while intersectionality, the idea that different oppressions in a person can create different experiences and very specific experiences of being the concept comes from Kimberly Crenshaw's discussion of Black women in the United States and how they were particularly discriminated in the same way that in different ways than white women and in different ways than Black men. So that is a power analysis, basically, where you look at different kinds of inequalities, that is gender discrimination, race discrimination, ableism, and classism, and how they interact. So most, I would say, of the DEI workers embrace this complexity and think that this is very interesting, valued, and they want to work with it. And others, though, find that it clashes with the Scandinavian idea of equality, which tends to emphasize sameness rather than difference. So these are the tensions that I saw, that it's difficult to move from good intentions to real change because the cultures around them, most of the people who were very positive to intersectionality, I would say no one was really negative towards it. They also didn't see that they could work. They didn't have the possibilities to use these concepts in their work. So these tensions are really showing that it's not just about policies or numbers, which is a very easy way to look at diversity, but it's also navigating these competing ideas of fairness, identity, and power in the local context. So if we try to understand these underlying discussions, we can also see why progress towards diversity and equality can sometimes stall, even when seemingly everyone agrees that it's important. So, as I say here, the diversity perspective is also all used as innovation, business value, difference as a strength, but then also in research that you bring in different perspectives and you make better research, for example. And there is, of course, research finding that shows that, but it is usually so much more. And then you get into the intersectional aspects of power analysis and looking at a specific context. And I will go deeper into the sameness here in the next couple of discussions here. So through the report and through my research article, I found 4 themes: diversity, sameness, and measurability, policies and possibilities, time and advocacy, organizational sexism, and harassment. So in this presentation, I will focus on the 2 first ones, the bolded ones, diversity, sameness, and measurability, and policies and possibilities. Love that alliteration there. So first we'll get into diversity, sameness, and measurability. So getting into the Scandinavian thing that I saw in comparison with both other European countries and compared to the US. So diversity is a way in the Scandinavian countries, you use ways of smoothing over difference to make people equal. So Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, we are all in a fight to claim who is the most gender equal country in the world. But different aspects of diversity, specifically ethnicity and race, are also more taboo and difficult. I saw this theme in the other European countries too. But this is the context that I know best and feel I can speak on. And one of the interviewees in Denmark describes that this is a narrative of Scandinavian cultures and also Nordic. I will include you. I saw a person from Finland in the discussion here, but I specifically was only in the Scandinavian countries. That's why I'm using the Scandinavian term. But we see ourselves as very gender equal, and we are in many metrics. But this also can blind us from working with or even seeing other dimensions. So in the report and in the article I discussed that my interviewee says that this causes an inaction from seeing. We don't see inequalities, and we don't act on other forms of diversity aspects. We only focus on gender because that's where we feel safe and that we are dominant in a way. And the anthropologist Marianne Gullestad described that the Norwegian approach to equality, as she describes it, as equality as sameness. That sameness is the basis for equality. So in the article, I extend this to say that I see this in all the Scandinavian countries I studied. That sameness means that difference and focusing on difference as a strength becomes problematic. So addressing inequalities because of difference then becomes very difficult with a starting point. If you want to smooth over any differences and say, no, we're all equal here, then you can't really address it. This becomes very visible when talking about race and ethnicity, where there's the phrase of colorblindness, and that can impede this anti-racist work. Colorblindness in this case means ignoring a person's race or ethnicity, or claiming that it doesn't matter for any specific situation, which also can deny a person's lived experience with the racism. So this connects with sensitivity of measuring other forms of diversity. And I've had strong reactions sometimes from people who, when I discuss measuring other forms of diversity, because most people see measuring gender, usually binary gender, as very neutral. It's a neutral representation. But I think we can measure other forms of diversity in sensitive and legal ways. I'm a proponent of using self-identified identity markers to track differing career paths, pay disparities, sick leave, experiences of harassment. So if the goal is not just to pay lip service to diversity, there has to be a starting point, mapping the differences, not just numerically or box ticking wise, but actually through qualitative studies and understanding the local context. So one such contextual factor is what I've seen in using international researchers, especially in Europe, as a form of diversity metric, that is doing enough for ethnicity and race diversity, for example. But that is a tricky situation. Because the Swedish example, we have a huge underrepresentation of people with immigrant backgrounds who are born in Sweden in Swedish universities, both as students, staff, and researchers. So having international students or researchers can be a form of diversity, but it can also be a white person from a neighboring country with a very similar culture. So it ignores the contextual nature of what diversity is. And when I met sometimes white men in continental Europe who were actually feeling, and probably were right, that they were being discriminated against because they were not native speakers of Dutch, for example. They spoke Dutch and came from a neighboring country, but they felt that their academic careers were being hindered because they were not natives. And that is a very specific difference between Europe and the US, I would say, that we have these very large, we're very close to each other, but we see each other as very different, despite sometimes being very similar. And then looking at policies and possibilities. So the interviewees' universities follow international and national policies and legislations on increasing gender equality and diversity. So the European Union's demand for gender equality plans, for example, for funding. And that is brought up as a motivators by one of my interviewees for universities to act. So a Danish university worker sees this legislation as the reason for why his position was prioritized, while other positions were being cut at the university. And he says, I'm not sure I would be in this position if there weren't these requirements from the EU. That's honest talk. So he sees that these kind of legislations and recommendations and demands actually force universities to keep these kind of positions. Someone who can write this kind of report and set these plans and follow up. So a Norwegian interviewee also said that the work had ramped up after national anti-discrimination legislation begun to focus more on active measures and actually following up how the universities were doing active measures. And I can see a bit of a split here from the Swedish case. So throughout my thesis work, one of my conclusions was that the gender equality and diversity work had been fragmented in my studied university, where it was split into the project that I was studying, the broader gender mainstreaming project that is for most universities in Sweden, and then we had gender equality officers, and then we had leadership. So for several years in Sweden, there have been numerical goals of hiring or promoting women professors at Swedish universities. And the gender equality officers I studied also, looking at fragmentation, had 10% usually of their positions dedicated to their work. So this was also problematized by a lack of mandate. That most of them had engineering backgrounds with little training on DEI work or equality work. So they had to, and they did not often have the time to study for themselves or to be able to suggest measures for improvement. But they also didn't have the mandate to actually run through. They were supposed to, at that university at that time, be an inspiration rather than actors. So the policies often focus on recruitment, but very little on retaining diverse talents, which I will get into a bit more later. So it's very unclear mandates, usually limited time, and that is the case of faculty representatives who were equality officers. So there are competing logics here, I would say. So that's this is the conclusions from my research article. So my study looks at people working with DEI at these universities and how they talk about the work, what challenges they face, and how different perspectives can shape what equality diversity means in practice. So talking to HR professionals and scholars in these at these Scandinavian universities, it became clear that their experience and outlooks differ quite a bit. Those in HR or full-time equality positions, they expressed optimism often. They felt they could make progress through clear goals and institutional processes. In contrast, researchers and engineers, especially those who do this work alongside their regular academic jobs, describe frustration. They see limited institutional support and very little time or resources devoted to the task. Often, they are expected to solve complex issues of inequality with 10% or 20% of their working time. So these tensions also reflect deeper issues in how diversity, intersectionality, and equality are understood, but especially practiced. So adding more aspects of diversity, like ethnicity or class, some feel complicate things further. And many, they embrace intersectionality as a theoretical idea, but then in practice it feels impossible to implement. Talking openly about ethnicity or race can still be uncomfortable in the Scandinavian context, where, as I said, the dominant idea of equality is based on sameness. The idea that we are or should be treated the same. And then if you say something that suggests that people are not treated the same, this becomes a conflict. So equity becomes very difficult with that starting point. And it makes it hard to discuss how people's experiences differ based on background, identity, or power relations. So another key finding is how diversity is often framed in technical universities as something that brings business value, new perspectives, creativity, and innovation. This is a positive narrative, but it risks turning diversity into something that can be measured and that is instrumentalized rather than understood and something you have to maintain. So counting the number of women or people who are othered might be easier than addressing underlying power structures that shape who is included and is excluded. So in summary, what does that mean? In short, equality work at technical universities operates within these competing logics, I would say. On the one hand, there's the engineering mindset of problem solving and measurable progress. And then recognizing this tension between that and intersectional perspectives that look more at power and retention rather than just getting a group of diverse people that maybe don't work well together. Because that is also the aspect. How do you maintain diversity? How do you keep this group functioning and good? And that can be very difficult if there is animosity based on different isms or homophobia, transphobia, whatever it is. You have to be able to deal with these conflicts as an organization. So I think recognizing these tensions between engineering engineering mindsets in some ways and the goals of DEI initiatives. So we have to move beyond the checklist and move towards more of a context-sensitive change. So understanding how power, culture, and belonging is negotiated within the local context. And then going into the report part of this presentation, from the report, I also included STEM scholars in this because their experience were very interesting to see also their experience of how their university works with these issues as being women and people of color who are just normal faculty members. So they could reflect on how they deem the work is being done. So it was both people who were researching gender, diversity staff working full time, or in various different versions of full time or not. But I did 23 interviews. I excluded one who wasn't recorded from the US. But I was 12 universities, one UK university, one Norwegian university, two German universities, two Danish universities, three Dutch universities, and four US universities. So my way of doing this was contacting offices, like DEI offices, gender equality offices, and individuals who I was recommended to talk to. And some universities never answered and didn't want to respond and participate. But those who did respond received the interview themes that focused on how is the work structured, who does what, how do they see gender equality in STEM and engineering versus other parts of academia, and culture and diversity beyond binary gender and intersectionality. So I asked also what they thought are the main causes of women's marginalization in STEM, which got a varied array of answers, actually. It was very fun. It's unfortunately not a part in my research article, it's part of the report. So if you want to delve deeper into that, you can read it there, what they think are the multitude reasons. No one said one thing, thankfully, because that would be very reductionist. It's usually a complex cocktail of things. So this is the easy table here of the differences, I would say, that I saw in my research. But even before I began my research there in 2023, I did an online study of the different universities and looking at how they describe their work. So in the pre-study that I did, I visited, and the main thing that I saw was a huge difference, of course, was in the US post 2020, with the protest for BLM, Black Lives Matter, and calls for racial justice, this was the main dominant theme on all the US universities I visited, I would say. They all had big action plans for including Black people and including discussing the racial justice was the main thing that they were talking about. And then, of course, the US had, important word there, past tense, affirmative actions, or they still do in some ways, but that means especially that they have quotas on the undergraduate level with scholarships based on class, which they usually measure through family income, gender, and ethnicity. So in the US, they had offices or DI managers at the different department most often. So most of the universities I visited, one of the universities I visited, and two of them were these actually, minority majority cities, which means that in this city that the majority of the population of the city is Black. And their very outspoken goal that they describe is that they should reflect that. And that they should reflect their country's diversity in their students, faculty, and administrative staff. And I think this comes to the first category here, race as a demographic category. In the US, it was, and is still to some extent, common and systematically collected. but in Europe, rare and sensitive, often avoided. And affirmative action and targeted programs established in law and policy at the time that I did the interviews. And partially in Europe, I would say, mainly almost exclusively gender, especially looking if you have any metrics for it. And then also in both countries, that's still a bit, it has met pushback. And then looking at dedicated DEI offices and staff. So in the United States, this was common, even at the department school level, they had someone full-time or more than 50% position working with these issues on the local department level, not only at the central universities, which I saw more in Europe, that this was centralized and often had limited resources, that they were not spread out across the different departments and can tailor their ideas and measures to this context. So the country in Europe that I saw that was closest to the US was the UK, where they tracked several aspects of diversity among staff and had local organizing for a multitude of identities. So more of it, both intersectional, but also actually keeping data on identities, self-identified identities. So the people in these positions in the US often came from community organizing backgrounds, had legal training or background in social science or humanities. So they also, of course, then had faculty representatives, which is, I would say, more common in Europe. But in the report, I think it's the final page in the report that you'll get later. You can click on the link for it. I have a chart of the DEI offices or quality officers ratios, where I look at how many employees they have and how many DEI workers or equality officer workers they have at the university. So, as Melly discussed, and as I've already alluded to, this is changing, as you may know. The DEI efforts in the United States, and it has taken effect in some universities. A scholar I know who had a equity position has been terminated, that position, in just the last couple of months. And in one of my US interviews, a DEI worker there discussed the organized campaigns of protesting against women-only events and how that limited their work. And she described it then as a small minority who object to these initiatives, but unfortunately, that is not how things have developed. And in early this year, Chalmers, my alma mater, inaugurated the DEI office, and there was a backlash against this in Sweden. With both local politicians, local and not, and the national politicians, and just normal people who saw that this was outrageous, that a DEI office was opening, and they were often using the rhetoric that the US is divesting from DEI, and that Trump has seen that this is useless. That was used as arguments in the Swedish debate against Chalmers having a DEI office. So we can see here that these arguments travel, and I assume, and I know that they travel in a lot of other European countries as well, where the anti-gender movement has been very strong. But I think this is where the institutions must stand fast in their commitments and continue to invest even more resources and to uphold a free academia, actually, where we're not falling for these mobs that are encouraging our that just because someone is doing something in another country, we should follow that line. And that I think that we should work for this free academia where equity, equality, and diversity are key values. So this resistance and backlashes have existed for a long time and don't seem to be subsiding. But I do think that university leaders need to be aware of this and to be strategic about this. And clearly make a stand, but especially make stands that are backed up by actions. As I said, investments into more personnel and gaining local knowledge of the specific challenges. Because then it makes it easier to just respond to these backlashes and say, this is what we're doing, we see this need, this is what we want. And one of the most memorable quotes I got from the US interviews came up in a discussion of what practically can be done to change academic cultures and to increase the number of women specifically. And she said, don't say pipeline. That assumes that there is only one way, and that if it's leaking, what are you doing to address those leaks? Find out what is causing all those leaks instead of just, oh, that it's a pipeline that's leaking. Oh well, here's a pathway, because we can always adjust the pathway to minimize error along the way. So she really emphasizes that we should use the path metaphor instead. And she was working with diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM departments at the university. And she puts this turn, I would say, and just assuming leaks are just going to be there and maybe working around that is an idea that I've seen in some cases. And that it's, here we are. There we are. Sorry for the cough. So she's specifically working with this, and she thinks that it's not a straight pipeline. And that metaphor has really gone a long way, hasn't it? And her narrative of a path suggests that you can change it. You don't have to have this narrow pipeline with everyone some fall out of, basically. It doesn't limit our way of imagining something different. Her narrative here is talking specifically about structural and cultural obstacles and oppressions that make it so that people leak, and some leak more than others. I would say that this encapsulates more structural and cultural work I saw in the successful universities that I visited that made successful journeys towards increasing gender equality. And I will get into those. First, unfortunately, we'll start with the difficulties. This is always the case, but this is summarizing what I saw as issues that my interviewees described and from my overarching PhD project over the last 5 years. So summarizing, the major issues are understaffed DEI offices, a lack of accountability and weak leadership commitment, fragmented structures, and excluding social science expertise. So going into the lack of accountability, I would say that it's not following what is successful or failures, and then lack of leadership buy-in on every level, basically, I would say that here. And then placing efforts outside the normal organization can lead to what I describe here as fragmented structures, where there is no clear overarching strategy. So out of these, the one that stands out in the Scandinavian context is understaffing. And I would say that one of my interviewees said, who's a DEI manager for all staff and students over 3,000 people, 30,000 people, 30,000 people. And that is a huge understaffing, of course. It's systematic, and no one expects that a person can educate and keep strategies for all of these people of varying positions, for all staff, both research and non-research staff, and for students, groups with varying different needs and how to work with these issues. So it's difficult to see how that is a serious effort. So accountability-wise, not following up, a lack of progress as well. No real evaluations or feedback when a department is not meeting their goals, and when they're not retaining people that they hire. And I would say this relates to leadership buy-in, as they're failing to act towards shared goals requires attempting to reach them and sharing that down the line. So some researchers have suggested that this lack of success or lack of or this lack of success can be remedied by tying promotions and pay raises and to these results, but also rewarding leaders who succeed and not rewarding lack of success and progress. Which this is seen as something that is crucial for universities. It's part of their strategies. So if you're not reaching these goals, there should be consequences. And placing these efforts outside of the normal organization, gender equality and diversity are already marginalized topics at technical universities. So placing them in their own little corner only emphasizes that. And it might even tie it even stronger to the group of people who are marginalized, making a majority think that a dominant group dismiss this as it's not their thing. I'm not part of this group, so they can work on it. So it's seen as a side project or something that only the people who are affected should work with. And the social science aspect here, it's not just a bid to get me further work. But universities that have succeeded have usually included gender scholars and social scientists working with these things centrally. So hiring people with the skill sets that are needed and who can follow current research and make judgment on efforts and their effects. So not just analyzing the statistics.
Kaido, just
Yes.
short information,
Yes.
because we have also some questions just
Oh,
to do some time management. If you could finish like in 4 or 5 minutes maybe, and then we have enough time also for the questions at least that can be still connected, of course, to the contents. Thank you.
okay.
Mhm.
Yes. So the universities that stand out, they had, we'll get here, targeting higher initiatives. And this is a controversial example, where they, for a time, hired only women for positions, and it was a European country, and that this was led on by actually university leadership saying that we are going to. The suggestion was to have some limits on this, but university leadership said no, we're going to do it 100%. And of course, as some of you may know, they went to the Court of Human Rights in Europe for gender discrimination. But they ended up hiring not 100% women for these positions in engineering, but 50-50 range. But I would say that they do not regret this, and they work with other cultural aspects as well. So these aspects were seen as the recruitment was one part, but the cultural way of working with this and integrating these people into the workplace and having scouting teams for finding women, I think that was the main success factor here. And then we'll get into some of these. So the universities I visited that have been successful in both recruiting and retaining women and increasing diversity has some very few simple things that connect them. Context-specific measures, analyzing the status quo and historic efforts, and based on those findings, tailor measures on the departmental level. Education and training are offered freely to employees regularly, and then we have central and local accountability. So what do you need to make this happen? Expertise with time and money. It might sound pretty straightforward, but if these efforts are not set up to succeed with enough resources, personnel resources or funding, they can't go forward, of course, and be that expertise be HR or researchers or consultants. So then we get into the practical key takeaway that you will be getting after this is the expansion of these practical tools and my takeaways, which I gave to my university specifically based on my research. And these are divided into these 4 categories. So context-based goals and requirements for increased diversity and gender equality. And this requires ongoing qualitative analysis of local barriers and exclusionary practices beyond quantitative numbers. And then transparency, accessible data from employee surveys broken down by gender and possibly other identity markers. Resources, departments and DEI offices should have a budget, training a sufficient number of employees to be able to carry out long-term strategic work. And then the last one, consequences. If goals are not achieved, there should be clear measures, for example, requirements for action plans or external reviews. So these are the 4 methods I would highlight to build capacity for change. And this varies, of course, who you're listening to this. Bringing in, I would say, the last 2 points I would say are more for people in leadership positions. They can allocate resources, enable change. And as I said, you will be given these at the end, so you can look at if you want to suggest this, if you want to see how would this work for my university or department. Is this something we already do? How can we do it better? How can we spread it, this practice? Yes. And that is, if you want to scan this code, if you want to see me on the internet and the social webs, this is where I am, and this is my email address. But I'm done, and you will get further readings and references in the slideshow that Melly will be sharing with you.
Yes, I will be sharing this. Thank you so much, Kaido. Very insightful, very interesting. Thank you so much, really.
Thank you.
Very cool. In the meantime, I will just, if you stop sharing, or I stop this for you again as an
Yes,
extra service,
thank you.
I will just exactly put us both in the spotlight so people can see you and can see in a second also the questions that we already have. Let me do that. And in the meantime, of course, everyone is invited to add more questions to the Mentimeter. So we have right now 5 questions. Let me see if you can see this. Yes. Okay, so maybe straight away, let's start them and
Yeah.
then answer or hear your answer to that. And feel free, everyone, to add more. Even the time is maybe at the end, of course, always limited. We will make sure that all questions are at least answered in worst case in a written way in the follow-up email. All right. So the first one I see here. So do
Mm.
you think that equity is the better term than equality since it doesn't imply sameness and therefore allows to address specific inequities? Good question. Okay.
Yes.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would say yes
Mhm.
to that question, but also even more because equity allows for actually addressing these issues. Because equality means everyone gets the same. Like there's always, I hate to be a stereotype, but there is this like image of equality. There's people watching a football match and they all get the same height of pallets. They're varying heights. So some can't see. So basically overcoming what the inequalities create. Basically, I think that's what equity gives us rather than equality. Something that actually addresses the issues rather than just saying we will get the exact same amount when that might not be enough. We look at accessibility, for example. Uh, People need different things and different amounts of support and help. And if we don't achieve that, then it's not really inclusion, I would say.
Oh, it's not really inclusion in this case. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, okay, very good. I hope this question is answered and maybe even triggered more comments or questions. Feel free. Also, you don't have to use Mentimeter, by the way. If someone wants to say anything, I'm also just observing if someone raises the digital Zoom hand. So feel free to speak. Also, it is also, of course, possible. Or just use the Zoom chat if you find it too complicated with Mentimeter even. But we have more questions. So this was the first one. Let's continue to the number 2. Gender equality policies are still overwhelmingly about women and gender. Sorry, women and men. Yeah, women and men, it says. Even the European Union's EIGA. Could you recommend official resources that could be used to advocate for gender diverse equality policies?
No, unfortunately, I wouldn't. I think that it should be included, of course. But
Mhm,
unfortunately, because my scope of my research didn't include this, generally, I added this by myself. And
mhm,
that has not been the main focal point because most of the universities I've studied have not dealt with anything else than binary gender. Uh, Either looking at it that they don't have third legal genders, like Sweden, we don't have third legal gender.
mhm.
And so you can't measure it apparently. So that is I think this is, I would say, a huge issue, but I don't unfortunately have a huge array of resources I can share on this, unfortunately.
Are you at least aware of any, let's say, organizations or maybe activities like fighting for this also, or kind of advocating for this more, or at
N
least in some
no, I wouldn't
ways?
say
No?
so, but I can say the hopeful thing is that most of the
Yeah.
people I interviewed wanted
Yeah.
this. So people who
Okay.
are working with these issues are very aware of this.
Mhm. Maybe it will be the time to establish this at least once someone asked that question right now.
Hmm.
So, okay, interesting. Very good. Thanks for that. I hope the answer at least, the question is at least answered in a way. And I will just continue because we have like 6 right now, but maybe can be more. Let's see. The next one I have on the screen is what can we do as, yeah, now it's about Enhance Alliance that is hosting this event, of course. Can we do as Enhance Alliance, which brings together 10 universities? Also, your university, Kylo, Chalmers is part of it. So is it better to do joint efforts? Okay. Or is it better to do maybe like not joint efforts, just nationally? How do you see that after so big tour in Europe and US?
No, I think absolutely sharing because I think there is a
Mhm.
lot of for some people they expressed isolation in this. Uh,
Isolation.
the people who work with these issues, that they don't know how other people are doing it, and not being in huge contact. So I think Enhanced Alliance could be a meeting place, or similar
Hmm.
similar organizations can be meeting places for people who work with these issues,
Hmm.
and actually meet and discuss what
Hmm.
are we doing, how are we doing it. So I
Hmm.
think it's a good forum for that.
Hmm. By the way, also, of course, from my position in the Enhance Alliance, by the way, if there are people interested in organizing or finding out similar interested networks or organizations or units within our 10 universities, so we are also as an Enhanced Diversity Office very happy to facilitate a kind of this meeting with you, with whoever you are, to meet within the Alliance scope. So doesn't matter so which country you are from, actually, just to break through this isolation, like you just said, Kaitlo. So we are happy to facilitate if there is any need for a joint meeting to share and maybe do actions together. Okay, so the next one, I would say, the next question, number 4, you said the AI often reduce to numbers, but not to culture. But we are also very limited in collecting numbers. So how can we really address culture?
Yeah, by not just looking at the numbers, because that is because if usually the numbers is a thing that you have, but they usually are very inaccessible. When I was
Hmm.
doing my pre-research, I was trying to find different universities, what how my the numerical representations, and they were very limited, or only
Hmm.
published in the local language with no translations and no translation of positions. So it is very inaccessible, even the numerical data, I would say.
Hmm.
But you can, of course, if you have the resources, study by interviewing people, like basically asking and seeing in employee surveys, how are people asking, talking about harassment. You can measure those things and try to get a view of where do we have these issues, what issues do we have where. So you can get at that experience if you do other kind of measures instead of just looking at the statistics.
Hmm.
So you can access it
Yeah,
and get some idea.
and get some idea. Okay, thank you. I hope this is also answered by our expert. And the next one I have here is just yesterday, I read an article about how boys keep falling behind girls in school and academia in Scandinavia. Yet in academia, we always focus on women. How do you see this?
Yeah, no, I think that this is a field of interesting research, because we can see it in lots of parts of the world that boys are falling below. But it's the interesting case there when I've been at a
Mhm.
university where we're looking at the opposite gender representation of the university students. Because Chalmers, I think, was the opposite of because it's 60% women doing the university degrees in Sweden, and
Mhm.
40% men. And then at my former university, it's the other way around. So we're still, of course, in my specific research case, we have these still gender imbalances that are a majority men, while the university population as a whole in Sweden is majority women. So women
Mhm.
aren't taking these educations. I think that is interesting, and I think there should be and there is research about why boys are falling behind. And unfortunately, that is also usually linked to detrimental gender cultures.
Mhm.
That it's not cool to be seen as to work in school and these kind of things, and that you're not getting the support that you need, maybe.
Mhm. Thank you. And I have one more last one at least, so far at least. So the last question on Mentimeter. Here we go. Race as a concept is uncomfortable for Europeans, I think. Should we still make people self-identify it in hiring processes and so on? Oh yeah.
I think
Mm.
voluntary self-identification obviously should be the
Mhm.
way there, because you can. I think it would be insensitive to force people to answer these questions, and also be very specific of how are you using that data. What are you doing with that data?
Mhm.
I think that is very sensitive to collect this data in Europe specifically. And I
Mhm.
think there are ways, like Chalmers has done things to work with this. For the students, there is this kind of data actually about all the discrimination grounds. Is something we collect data voluntarily from students, for example, where they can say if they have a disability, for example, if they want to share.
Mhm.
And then you can see that data basically of how it aligns with their experience of education. We don't,
Mhm.
unfortunately, have that for faculty and other staff,
Mhm.
but that has been done for students, and the legal team has said it's totally okay to do that. And of
Hmm.
course, as I said, it's voluntary data that they share. They don't have to share these data points. But I think they saw patterns in this in rate of how many people graduate and things like that. So they could see
Hmm.
the patterns based on especially disability actually and lack
Hmm.
of disability support. So I think it's important data, but it should be used
Hmm.
sensibly, of course, and with
Hmm.
uh, all kind of checks and balances of how you're storing what you're using that data for.
Yeah. I think the big issue, data collection and management. All right, thank you. This was the last question. Even now, number 7 will appear. I will just take it in the follow-up email answering, just looking at the time. So thank you, Kaido, a lot for your insights. And
Oh,
thank
thank
you
you.
to everyone listening and also asking these questions. Let me just be sure that I really did not skip anything in the chat of Zoom. No, just people that had to leave. And there is no raised hand also in Zoom so far. Okay, I will now, of course, you said we will share your policy recommendations as a practical tool with our audience, also those who could not come today. So it is a big group in showed interest to today's topic. I'm very happy about that. Let me just share the screen again, not the Mentimeter anymore, but just the PowerPoint and share with you just as last part of today's session our other Lunchinars and even more events if you are interested to the whole scope of diversity and inclusion related knowledge and you want to learn and share this learning also with your networks. So we have on Monday, 17 November, uh, understanding neurodiversity with 2 experts from ENHANCE again. Like today we had an expert from Chalmers, and in 17 November we will have an expert from Gdansk Tech and from UPV Valencia, Poland and Spain. And 12 December, we will have also again a very relevant enhanced luncheon, the last one this year, about the topic of gender-based violence. And we will have 2 experts from Podimi, Milano in Italy. But Enhance Alliance is actually more working on these topics just to create more awareness and space for discussion. Other topics will be, for example, again in November, Mind the Gap, exploring cultural differences will be another topic because as university alliances, we deal with lots of different cultural differences here. And in January, we will have another webinar, Employees with Autism Spectrum Disorders in the Digitalized Work Environment. Both webinars will be organized by our enhanced member university, Gdansk Tech. And so, as you see, a lot to choose. Today was a very insightful and interesting session. I thanks again to our speaker, Kylo, for sharing your research with us. So I'm very happy about it. Before I finish the session, let me just also put this final link in the chat. And where is the chat? Here is the chat. So I invite everyone who are still here before leaving the session also to finish to complete this short evaluation form. Please do it so then we can also see how we can improve this kind of short offers like 60 minutes in a webinar. You just did a tour through the whole continent, old continent and the new continent. So this is what we try to share with you, our expertise. So I hope you profited and enjoyed also this little tour. Thanks a lot. And yeah, I invite you to follow us also in different channels and stay connected with Enhance Alliance. Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.